I'm John Bradshaw, Executive Director of the Enough Project, and I'm here with Omer Ismail, who is a Sudanese human rights activist and a senior advisor to the Enough Project. We want to take a look at what's happening right now in Khartoum. Over the last 3 weeks, there have been very serious protests in the streets of Khartoum, not yet massive in size, but very persistent, unlike what has happened in Khartoum in the past. So we wanted to get a sense. There's been a crackdown on the protesters, a lot of arrests, detentions, crackdowns on the media. But I wanted to get a sense from you, Omer, as a Sudanese, where you see these protests going, how they differ, first of all, from what's happened in Khartoum in the past. There have been protests, but this seems to be something different. How do you see this as being different from those previous protests?
Thanks. It's good to be with you, John. I believe there is a degree of discontent in the country in general with this government and with the things that this government had done from the war in Darfur, in the Blue Nile State, and in the Nub Mountains. The Sudanese people are not happy with what happened in the separation of the South and all that. They blame the government for that. What it started as a protest against the austerity measures, which, by the way, happened in many places like Greece or in Italy or even here in the United States. But nobody that we heard in this place is asking for a regime change, for example, like it is happening in Sudan. So these protests are more vigorous, more wider in terms of the area. It is not just in Khartoum, it is in different other cities in Sudan, from Wad Medani to Port Sudan to Sinnar, Gadaref, and so on. And the significant thing is these are different types of Sudanese. They started like the students and the other smaller, what they call the Facebook organizations like Grifna and Sudanese for Change. But now more and more people are getting involved. More and more people are feeling the crunch of the economic situation and also feeling the reaction of the government. Until today, like 2,000 people were detained, and there was unprecedented violence in trying to put down these protests.
It seems that all of the protesters are united in their desire to see the Bashir regime no longer in power. But beyond that, what are the common aspirations of these different groups that are coming together, and what kind of a future do you think that they are looking for in Sudan, assuming that the regime is no longer in power?
To begin with, the regime is not going to be changed tomorrow as a result of these demonstrations. They have to be more persistent, more bigger, but I would see it as the prelude to all that, because it's a death by 1,000 cuts. This regime's days are numbered. There is no doubt about that. However, it is not going to happen overnight. The opposition is coming together, and that is a good thing. Before the government capitalized on the separation, between these different groups, and they are dividing them even further, trying to co-opt some of them to join the government, and so on and so forth. Now all the opposition groups, the major opposition groups, are coming together, and these smaller groups of the youth and the students are also coming together. And let us not forget, SRF is just on the horizon. That is the Sudan Revolutionary Front.
Yeah.
And this is the armed movement that brought also together on board different armed movements from the south and from Darfur to work together. So it is not a good situation for the government. It might take some time, but eventually this regime is going to change.
Yesterday we saw the signing of the Democratic Alternative Charter by a number of the opposition groups, and it was very interesting to see that in that charter they started talking about a planning process for a post-Bashir transition period. What do you see as the significance of that?
The National Consensus Front is very significant. Now, these are the traditional groups, the older parties, the larger political parties in Sudan, parties that were in government when this government took over in a military coup in June of 1989. They want democracy back. That is number one. Number two, they want the end for this regime that has been there for 24 years now and counting. They want a regime that is going to be inclusive. Unlike this regime that excluded many groups, it came from a minority group anyway, together with the military. So I think what is happening now in Sudan is significant in the sense that it is not just the traditional political parties that are coming together, but also the youth groups are joining them, and they are not forgetting the opposition that is coming from the military side or the different militias that are fighting the government. So we are seeing a concentration of all these opposition groups descending on this government, and that is a new thing. It is important from the point of view that some of the people in the center are, the traditional powers that are in Sudan is now changing. People from the periphery are joining hands with them, and very soon we are not going to see that center versus periphery challenge, and hope that the future of Sudan is going to be better with all these people coming together. The important thing is the day after. What they're going to do when Bashir is not in power anymore.
Now, we've heard from some people, some analysts and critics saying that once the Bashir regime leaves, Sudan will collapse and fragment into various parts, with Darfur and other parts going their separate ways. Do you think that's likely to happen?
No. This is actually playing in the hands of the regime, because the regime says it is us or the chaos. No, I think the Sudanese are more wiser than that, and people now trying to talk about the Arab Spring, for example, and its impact on Sudan. No, the Sudanese have done it before in October 1964, and they have done it in April of 1985. In both cases, they unseated dictatorships. They are going for the hat-trick, and they are going to do it this time. Again, it is in their DNA. It is not something that is important to Sudan. This is indigenous and homegrown. And they know how to do it. They all have the feeling that actually the regime being there is the danger, and that is what is going to bring Sudan to fragmentation and disintegration. So what they try to do is to put together whatever is left of the country now, and to do away with this regime that separated the South, that pit one region against the other, that committed all these human rights and atrocities, and to the extent that it was labeled as genocide and mass atrocities and war crimes.
Well, it's a fascinating situation, and we will continue to monitor it very closely through people like yourself and other members of the Sudanese diaspora who are both supporting and trying to understand what's happening there. And the Enough Project is very much behind the aspirations of the Sudanese people for democratic transition, and we will make it a focus of our work in the coming weeks and months. Thank you, Omer.
Go Sudan. Good luck.